I've dropped all 10 bolts down into the head and ran them down to their first pass. First pass is 14 foot-pounds, 36 foot-pounds, and a final pass of 49 foot-pounds, and then a verification pass. Check all bolts to make sure they are indeed at 49 foot-pounds. If any of the bolts make a noise while tightening down, loosen that bolt all the way up and take it back down to the amount of foot-pounds you're on with the other bolts. For whatever reason, if you didn't oil the bolts or something's in the hole causing it. Now there's 3 different torque wrenches to use. There's a digital, my preference, and a beam type, which is preferred to use on this motor, and a clicker type. If you're using a clicker type, just turn the bolts slow until the desired torque is reached. Just don't go too fast with it. I'm going to be using this digital torque wrench. It's a lot more accurate than the other ones, in my opinion. A lot more precise. And that's what we're looking for, precision. That's the order the bolts are in. To go back down, starting with the center facing the intake. And then 2 is 1 on the exhaust side in the center, and so on. Distributor, timing belt side, so I'm going to go ahead and make the second pass on them to 36 foot-pounds using the digital torque wrench. I've finished all 10 bolts, and I've already made the second pass to verify they're at 49. Be sure not to over tighten these jewels. So they're pretty good now. Awesome device. And the next thing I want to do, make sure no debris fell off in the head. And I'm going to roll the crankshaft back up on top dead center using that mark down on the dampener to line it back up. So I don't have any problems installing the cam and rockers. Okay, I've rolled the engine around the top dead center. The yellow mark's back at basically 12 o'clock. And I took and filled an oil cap full of oil and drizzled it over top of all the valve spring retainers. All 16 of them. Just put a little drizzle of oil down in the retainers. And then I filled the center of the head, about 1/4 of an inch of oil laying in those reservoirs. Not enough to run over and run out all down the timing belt or down the transmission. Cause I'll leave about a good 3/16 of an inch away from the cam bearing, because when the cam loads lay down into it, it's going to overfill them some. I'll leave a little space on, at least on each end. Good bit of space. And that'll help freshen it up. The cam bolts are going to have oil on them anyway, so. And then the valves all have oil on them. And I'm going to lay just a touch of oil stop burn or oil treatment. It's real thick. Lay just a touch of it and the end bearings on the cam particularly. Mix a little bit of motor oil and put a little in the trough there. I just don't want it running down into the seal area. Seal needs to be dry on the outside of it. It'll like it. Okay, it's ready for the camshaft to land in it. I'm going to stick the new seal on the end of the camshaft. It'll set right in this recess right there. And drop the cam down in there. Not getting any oil on the timing belt either. I've lubricated the inside of the oil seal with a little bit of this oil stop burn and motor oil combined. Just the inside of it where the camshaft's going to poke through. And I'm sticking on the camshaft and push it down in there. The outside of the seal's dry. And if you want to, you can spray the old seal area off with some brake cleaner. And if it's got too much of a lip worn on it, you can go over it a little bit with some of that 800 scuff pad on the end. Looks good enough. Put a little bit of lube on it. And the bevel part of the seal, base of the camshaft. Just be nice to it. And the cam should be clean. And I'll set it right down in this hole. Make sure the seal's square. And I'm pushing the cam from the distributor end all the way to the right. Of course, hitting my built-on thrust washer. I wanted to drizzle some motor oil on the lobes, but I think they're going to be alright as long as the reservoir is full of oil. And the caps already got oil on them. Put a little bit on the top of them. It's looking pretty good. One other thing, when you lay the camshaft in there, make sure that the keyway is at 12 o'clock on the camshaft before you set your rock arm assembly on there, so you don't bend the valve from the piston being up on top dead center. Now that the cam's prepped, I'll take a look at the rocker arms. And I'm just generally going to spray the bearings off. I'll leave the rest of it alone. And right on the ends, clean that silicone off of those ends where it meets with the head, and off of the bolts if it's on them, and the silicone off from around that dowel pin guide, and the flatness should be clean around it. So the oil won't wick out from underneath the valve cover mounted on top of it. Want to retreat it. Here's the oil jacket. The oil's just a mess. And all the bolts are still in except for the end ones, so that this stuff doesn't try to take off. they're spring loaded to keep them a certain distance apart and together and make it happen. But I'm gonna spray just the cam bearings a little bit and the bolt threads, and then relube the bolts and the cam bearings and get that silicone off the end. Where the distributor sits there. Alright, I've got the end caps degreased. Especially around this bolt hole. And the seal's going to sit in this area. It should be dry. I've got some motor oil and some engine stop burn on this bearing here. And this bearing, this bearing, this bearing, and this bearing. And it should be dry and oil free around this end and around this end where the distributor sets in. Sprayed any debris off of the mating surfaces of the cam bearings. Just make sure the seal area is dry and these bolt holes are dry on both ends. And the arch is where the valve pan cover seals, and it needs to be cleaned off. I used equivalent to like a toothbrush and some brake cleaner because you don't want to damage that surface of the bearing or the tube that's guiding it. And sprayed any debris off floating around. This is going to be the thrust bearing to keep the cam ultimately in one place from sliding back and forth. And I don't have any dirt on the rest of it, so I'm not going to fool with it, and it's still lubed up from where it was running before. And I'll probably just put a light drop of oil on the cam bearing bolts. And the heads are already clean and dry on these end two bolts there, the 10 millimeters. So when I set it down on there, the seal's going to smash into that arch, and it should drop it in line with it according to so. And these dowel pins, the bolts. And I'm going to want all rocker arms with the centers raised up slightly. And I'm going to put a touch of this high temperature gray silicone right against the edge, this cam seal and the related cam bearing, not too heavy, and just baby it back on the inside of that oil drain back. On both sides. Just kind of go around the bolt hole a little bit. It really doesn't take too much. And I want to keep it off the timing belt. And I'll go to the distributor side and put some around halfway up on the bolt. I picked the rocker assembly up and set it down there with the bolts in line with the holes. Then I had to wiggle the camshaft a little bit, slide it over until it's set in line with that cut in the thrust bearing part of the cam bearing, so it would drop on down on that thrust washer on the camshaft. And then I was doing that, I was checking to make sure all these rocker arms were up above the valves and not caught underneath one of the camshaft lobes. And then just started, I kind of put the outer 10 millimeters down till there's about a 1/16 inch gap. Then I went to the center and I started spreading out. Then I went to the end 10 millimeters and brought them down a little more. And the excess silicone that squeezed out of the end of the bearing can be wiped out. So it's not on the gasket. And it can be re-siliconed when you get ready for it. But as long as the bearing's sealed up to the inside of the valve cover, it'll be in good shape. Should be silicone all across where the valve cover seal goes, up over that on both sides. Make sure the seal's sitting in the hole square. I'm going to be tightening the 12 millimeter bolts to 14 foot-pounds and the 10 millimeter bolts on the outside to 9 foot-pounds, starting from the center outwards. And go ahead and drop the rear upper timing cover back into place, and it's one sole bolt in the bottom corner. It has a new piece of rubber that I kind of spot glued onto it. And stuff a rag down into the workings so you don't lose the bolt down in them. Shouldn't be too difficult unless the cover's not aligned right. And check that the crankshaft is on top dead center on its one timing mark, at least for external use. It's the one line out by itself, and it's ahead of 3 smaller lines. Check that it's in line with the pointer. Now, with any luck, the timing mark I'd put on it before taking it apart will line up with the mark on the cam. If not, I'll be verifying it with the 2 little indentations that'll sit flush with the head, one on each side. And I'll just, the keyway faces out looking at you, and the words up is wrote on the sprocket, spoke. Undo my bungee cord. Look down in the timing area, I don't see any chunks in the workings down there. Bring the timing mark around that I made. And the camshaft's off just a tad. Just bump the crank around a little bit. There we go. And Pull the crank forward a little bit and take the slack out of the front of the belt. Not too tight because I don't have any tension on the timing belt. Let's see if the mark's still lined up on the crank down there. No. Right there, I guess. But see if this marks in line with the surface of the head. Looks pretty good. Just saying, lay a straight edge on the head and run it right up to this line. I think it's in business. Now stick the camshaft sprocket bolt in. This cam bolt tightens down to 27 foot-pounds, and the back cover bolt tightens down to 7.5 foot-pounds, 8. And I hold the cam the same way as I took it off. Just get a flat bladed screwdriver against the head and lift up on one of the spokes while I'm tightening it. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that tensioner hold down bolt. It's 14 millimeter. I'm sure that the crank's in time with the camshaft. The marks all line up. Good. And that spring will tension the belt once you let up on the bolt. Break this tensioner bolt loose. And there. Just kind of wiggle the motor back and forth a little bit. I'll go forward with the motor just a tad so all the slack gets out of the belt. And the back still got a little bit on it. So I'll have to take and snug a tensioner back down and rotate the motor over once. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it till this camshaft makes one full turn and the timing marks are lined back up. I've rotated around one full cam revolution. Let the belt center itself. It seems like the belt's still a little stiff. So I'm going to help that arm push the belt down just a little bit on the spring down there. By snapping it. See if that takes it out of it. I've rotated on past the timing mark on the crank sprocket about an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and get all the tension on the front of the belt. And that's borderline acceptable, I guess. Don't want it super tight or the belt will howl and cause excessive wear, but this is really tight in the front here, the way it needs to be. And just a little bit of slack in the back, not much. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that extra bolt, the 14 millimeter. Down to 33 foot-pounds. Then rotate the motor over again, make sure the belt's not flopping around. Okay, I'm satisfied with the timing belt tension. I ended up actually bending a piece of wire and catching that arm down in there and pulling up on it just a little bit to take some of the slack out of the belt. It's not super tight, but it's not loose either. So the next pain is to adjust the valves. They should be adjusted below 100 degrees room temperature. First thing I want to do is roll this motor over on number 1 top dead center again and start with those valves. And always rotate the engine counterclockwise, which would mean as you rotate it, it pulls down the front of the belt, because the tensioner is actually pulling on the back of the belt in the middle down there. See some of the teeth. But I'm going to get a set of feeler gauges that reads 9 and 11 thousandths of an inch. As long as the camshaft sprocket reads out, and generally these marks are aligned with the head cover, and the pointer on the dampener is lined up, and just valves on cylinder 1, which is next to the timing belt. These clearances on the valves in the back facing the intake will be at 9 thousandths of an inch. The clearances on the front valves facing the exhaust manifold will be 11 thousandths. And the little lock nuts tighten down to 13 foot-pounds. Do not over tighten them and tear something up. This is an 11 thousandths feeler gauge. And I need a 10 millimeter box end initially, and a small screwdriver to turn the screws in the center of that. And what you want to do is turn this screw until there's a slight drag felt on the feeler gauge. Without the weight of the screwdriver pushing on it. Shouldn't be lifting anything, should slide in and out. I'll go just a fraction further. Hold that screw in place and tighten the lock nut down. And you want to kind of push against the screw against the direction the nut's turning to keep it from walking with it. I'll just snug it down first, see where I'm at. It's still a little loose, so I'll back it off. Do another 1/8 inch turn or so. Snug the lock nut down. That's about right. Might be a little heavy. You gotta have a feeler gauge going level with the valve spring where it'll wind. That's really close. As you tighten the lock nut down, it's going to pull the threads up on the center screw and open the gap up a little more. But the feeler gauge has to slide perfectly level with the spring and the valve, or it'll bind up. That's pretty good. Vary a little bit, but they all got to be done that way. What a pain. The final torque on those nuts is 13 foot-pounds, and then the feeler gauge will have to be slid in and out, make sure it's in the ballpark. Just don't forget to tighten the lock nuts down fully. Once the two front exhaust ones are done, then stick a 9/1000 feeler gauge underneath the intake ones and start running the screw down until they start to drag. Then hold the screw with the screwdriver and tighten the nut down to check it again, then finish tightening down the nut, lock nut down to 13 foot-pounds, and then check the clearance again. I'm going to rotate the crankshaft 180 degrees, and that'll put this up mark on the cam spoke at 90 degrees, level with the front of the head facing the exhaust, and then adjust the valves on number 3. Be 2 here and 2 there. Always rotate the crankshaft in a counterclockwise fashion. Mouse over the video and hit the circle I to continue to the next part of the video.